Welcome to Will's Personal Development Show podcast. My name is Will, and let's get into the podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the life lessons I learned traveling to China and the Philippines. Now, this was before COVID, and man, were these trips profound. To give you guys some context, I am Chinese American. However, I've spent my entire life in the United States of America. I hadn't been back to China in over 10 years. I'd gone um, a couple times, maybe three or four, when I was under 10 years old. I think mostly when I was super, super young, like, one or I can't even tell you, but I went when I was like young, like let's say 5 years old. So it's been a while, and obviously I'm very Americanized. But I wanted to give you guys that context because I think a lot of the experiences I saw over there were a bit kind of surreal and unique, coming from this kind of American perspective and American upbringing. And I wanted to focus on some of the things that were maybe shocking, but not just from a cultural standpoint, but from a standpoint of it being, I'm filming this during Asian Pacific Heritage Month. So it's a great time to honor Asians. I might even talk a little bit about the current events and current movies coming out with Asian leads, and just kind of honoring what's going on there. But the focus is going to be, at least at the start, on what I've learned from these travel adventures, and they were quite amazing, quite awesome. I've profiled some of the details on my blog already, but I wanted to kind of go more into depth and get more actionable, because you could really learn a lot from travel. You can really learn a lot about yourself, about the world, and really expand your mind, expand how your behavior, get different perspectives, which may make you more humble, more grateful, or just more wise to how the world is. So let's dive in. So I guess I got to start off with something that was uh, something I've kind of kept in mind, and uh, it's a little bit graphic, but I wanted to bring it off first because this is like the first thing I heard, or first thing that pops to mind, and it definitely got me thinking about the world. But basically, when I went to China, this was a couple years ago before COVID. Um, my dad wanted to show me one of the super malls, the super shopping malls at in China. And these places are really cool. You would think, at least the one I went to, before you enter, you think, oh, it's probably too overwhelming. There's no way you could just get lost in the mall, right? But it was actually very manageable, and I think part of it was because they had 7 or 8 floors. So even though it was stacked, since they were stacked on top of each other, you can kind of easily make your way through the mall without getting lost. I mean, there were maps, and each floor really wasn't that long. Um, and it was still long, but it was like something you can map in your brain. And then you can just always check the map to see which floor you needed to go on to see different shopping places. And it was kind of relatable, but also different. It was relatable in the sense that, yeah, this is like just like a legit shopping mall, like in some ways just as clean, if not more clean, and the architecture is fairly similar to something you see in the states. But at the same time, you could tell like this is definitely on a scale that you don't see in the states. I mean, 7 floors of this thing, and there's a lot of recognizable, relatable uh, brands. There's a Tesla store in there, and some recognizable clothing stores, but also a lot of Chinese brands and stores you hadn't heard about. So there was a mixture of like local and international. So I found that very special. And that's not what I wanted to talk about. What I was wanting to talk about was the poverty I saw while entering. Now, granted, there was a flood of people walking into this thing when I went in, and you know, probably 100 people that flow through the sidewalks and pathways to enter the shopping mall, and they all seem pretty average. Average clothes, nothing out of the ordinary. No one was extremely poor, except for what seemed like a man, a wife, and a child on the ground. Now, what was shocking, and this took me by surprise because I was just doing my own thing. I had no expectations for this, and um, if this is too much for you, you can click off now, and you don't have to listen. But basically, none of them had any legs, so they were basically like crawling with their arms on the floor, and they were panhandling. They were begging for money, so they had their bowls out. And you could tell in some ways, I could sense that like it was just another day for them. But I also got the sense that like they'd basically accepted their situation in life and their, I guess, level in society, and they were just making the most of it. Obviously, um, not feeling that great about it, but I also sensed kind of like a just general state of this is who we are, and kind of like day to day with it. But it was so shocking to me because I guess I felt bad for them so much. I was confused as to how they got to that state, especially the child who was maybe, I don't know, like 13, 14. Um, and it was just sad. And of course, a lot of the people walking by me who were locals to the area, um, I guess it was normal for them. A lot of them just walked past like it was nothing. And of course, I can't judge them or think about where they come from. I'm sure there's always caring people in every society and culture as well. So, um, but I was kind of taken by this, and I didn't know what to do. And by the time I could even think, like I was already like walking past them, and it was so shocking, and it got me. It it pointed me to the one reference point I had, which wasn't really that great a reference point, but it pointed me to that movie, Slumdog Millionaire. And there's a scene where they basically have all these, like, I guess, homeless children, and they have them sing, and the one who can sing the best, they burn out his eyes so he's blind, so that when people see him singing on the streets, they'll feel bad for them and then that guy will make more money begging. And so it's a rather sad, disgusting thing, but at the same time, I started wondering if that was what the case was. Did they intentionally chop this person's legs off? I don't know. I may never know. And obviously, a lot of people can speculate. A lot of people on the internet, anonymous people, probably have tons of opinions and assumptions that they believe to be true. But who knows how many of them are true? I would guess most of them aren't. You don't really know unless you know that person, or you were there in that situation, or you're familiar with the area. Um, so that's something I will kind of do some more research on, and I think what did I learn from this experience? What did I kind of gain out of it? I think it was a shock because I can't believe that level of kind of brutality or whatever it was, poverty happens, and it made me both feel like this person was figuratively and literally kind of, this child especially was kind of figuratively and literally chopped off at the knees. And by figuratively, I mean like in terms of that person's opportunities and situation in life. I mean they were just kind of screwed from a lot of potential from birth. I mean, sure, if she was born without those legs in the United States with a middle income supporting family, she would still have a lot of opportunity. She would make the most of it. I've seen a lot of people in wheelchairs. I even know someone, not well, but I know someone who became a Olympic uh, medalist in a wheelchair. So it's definitely possible, and you can definitely still have a lot of opportunity in certain developed countries, but in other countries, like it feels like, especially if you're born into like, you know, a family where you're at the bottom. I mean, what opportunities do you have? Like, you're basically destined to spend the rest of your days like panhandling. unless you just by chance stumble across something that changes your life, like maybe access to a computer or a phone, and then you start learning about starting a Shopify business online or something. So I would say the internet may be equalizing things to a bit, but even then, like I don't think in that situation it would happen. Like it's not just about the physical situation, but the psychological situation at hand. She was basically like, I mean, I could see it in their eyes, and maybe I was kind of um, overthinking, but I could see in their eyes that psychologically they had just been pounded into the ground in their minds that this is where they were, this is where they would be for the rest of their lives, and there's nothing that they could do to change it and to accept it. And once that gets cemented too much in your psychology, I mean, you don't even try to get out of that. Um, and so, really unfortunate. And the good thing is that I guess the world is getting better in the sense that there's less of that um, available, and less of that. I mean, even China, like the place I went to, I mean, it's slowly becoming, or some would argue quickly becoming, one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And hopefully there'll be less of that. And I don't really know. I don't know what that situation was. Like apparently, like I'm looking up some news articles now, and apparently sometimes like some beggars will fake it and they actually do have legs, but they hide their legs in a way where it looks like they don't have legs, just to kind of trick people into basically uh, begging for more money. And they do this by like basically having a hole in the ground or some other stuff. And I don't know for sure if that is the case, but you know, it is something that kind of just you know I was definitely kind of shocked by that, and maybe that was the case. Maybe they were just kind of swindlers. Apparently, I've heard news. I'm looking at a news story now, and they basically another guy tucks his legs and folds them into his jeans to make it look like he has no legs, but it was just like a trick. But I'll never know. I'll never know. And maybe someone with more insight in the area could tell me. It looked to me like they were basically moving around, the kid as well, without legs. And maybe they're just hustling and they're doing a good job of making money off the streets. But it's still represented and implied a lot of the uh, stuff in the world. I mean, regardless of if this specific instance was fake or not, there's definitely, especially in the history of time, and even nowadays, there's definitely plenty of countries, plenty of areas where people are just screwed from birth. And there's a reason why Warren Buffett, one of my favorite mentors, he he often says, if the children who get born in the U.S. are the luckiest children everywhere, and he often talks about the ovarian lottery. There's over 100 countries, and he was lucky enough to be born in the States. And that's so true. And I think the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is really trying to help change that, especially in Africa, because just based on where you're born, you put at a severe disadvantage. And luckily, the internet's kind of changing that. Someone can, even if they're in a different country, they can start a Fiverr account. They could learn about digital marketing and copywriting or blogging or Shopify stores or drop shipping. And even if they're in an advantageous place, if they have internet, they could learn this and potentially uh, change their life and their income. But it's still hard, and it's still crazy. So what's the second thing I learned in my travels across the Philippines and China? I think the second thing I learned about myself is that I definitely seem to be one who kind of looks for the similarities. I found myself on countless occasions looking and finding the similarities between me and my upbringing and the other country and its people. And I feel like I started to slowly realize that not everyone's like this. A lot of people, they look at the differences and you know, they may marvel at the differences. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And they may be like, wow, this culture is so different. They're so different. Their religion, their style of dress, their architecture is so different. And they might feel amazement towards that. Some might discriminate off of that. But for me, I don't know what it is. I think part of it is just my nature. Part of it is growing up in this multicultural country, the US, and looking for those similarities to relate to people when, you know, most of them are visibly different from me in terms of skin color or background. Um, some of it is just kind of that love and understanding that we are all human beings, and at our core we all want the same things: to be happy, to be loved, to be healthy, to have food on the table, to be heard. um, and then part of it is maybe just that desire to reach out and relate to someone when I'm in an anxious state in a unknown foreign country. The Philippines especially, I went alone. It was my first international solo trip, and I guess I wanted to see those similarities to relate and bond with those people. And, sometimes I definitely found them and it was amazing. Um, and, some, for example, while others would see the shopping malls, and yeah, I would notice some of the differences too, but I wouldn't always dwell on them that much. I would marvel at them. I think when I went to the Philippines shopping mall and in one of the small cities there, um, they had a lot of these stores that were not really stores. They were kind of like they were, but it was almost as if like someone was given like a $500 budget to fill up uh, s- a slot in the shopping mall. And as you can imagine, with that small budget, it doesn't look that pretty. So that's what some of the stores at the shopping mall look like. And I was kind of amazed by that. And while some might be like, wow, that's very different from us, I would notice that and I would marvel at it. But I would often focus on a lot of the similarities. Like, wow, they're still all lining up to get, KFC, just like we do at the States. Or wow, they really like ice cream, especially mango ice cream, and I love ice cream too. Or, wow, they laugh at the same things. They love. I hear BTS playing. I hear this artist playing. I listen to that as well in the States. Those were there's just countless moments of like that where for whatever reason I saw those similarities through the differences, and that I think that I noticed that was a kind of unique trait to me, because I might come out of a place and say like, wow, you know, it was maybe such an adventure, but I noticed so many similarities despite it being on the other side of the world. Even with the nature and the trees, like sometimes in certain areas, especially in the Philippines, there were palm trees that were just very different. But in China, especially, I went to a few places that were had a deciduous forest that was, although there's like slight differences, like in general, I was like, man, this is like more or less the climate and type of trees that I would see back in the United States. So I was kind of like, wow, that's so cool. Like I'm on the other side of the freaking planet, and you know there's these similarities, and I don't know if it's like me trying to bond with people or me trying to find humanity and connection in others who are different, but I think it's not completely that. It's also just the fact that, yeah, there are a lot of similarities despite us being so far apart, and that's the magic of it. That's the beauty of it, and I'm amazed by that and I honor that. So that's another lesson I learned from my travel. And I'm going to give a third lesson and then just wrap it up here. So, the third lesson I learned from my travels to these Asian countries is that things can be different, and things can get anxious and scary. And you might have mini anxiety attacks or whatnot. But in general, things are going to be okay. Um, just keep a solid head up, have some street smarts, and um, realize that you know you can do more than you think if you're smart about it, if you prepare, if you don't do anything too dangerous, and you're savvy, and just sit back and enjoy sometimes because it's a amazing experience that life has to offer, and it's amazing how diverse and beautiful the world is. And I do have a specific story to kind of illustrate this. Um, and the only time I had a mini anxiety attack in the Philippines was the day I landed. Um, and that was because, first off, I tried to save way too much money by uh, taking a long bus to New York and then flying out of New York instead of just straight up flying out, and then sleeping at the bus stop overnight because my friend who dropped me off could only do it like around dinner time, and then the bus didn't take off until midnight. So basically, I added an extra 24 hours to my commute time to get to the city I needed to get to in the Philippines. And considering the fact that I was trying to get to some remote island destinations, I had more travel ahead of me by the time I landed in the hotel. The hotel was kind of like a overnight pit stop in the city in the Philippines that I needed to stay. Basically, I landed in Shanghai, took Shanghai connection to Cebu in the Philippines, and then took the and you actually could ferry there, which I learned later, and that would have been cheaper. But I took the flight from Cebu to Tagbilaran City and stayed in a hotel that night. Probably landed mid morning and got to the hotel, and it was this tiny little budget thing where this twin bed barely fit in the room. And I was just sitting there, and for the next half hour, I was just kind of like anxious and scared to death of leaving my hotel. Because the alleyway leading up to it, it was a little bit sketchy, a lot of dirt roads and pavement, and I didn't really know what else was out there. All I saw were these photos I could see from Google Maps or Google, which is often especially in this case, a bad representation of what's actually out there. And so I got anxious. I was playing this fuzzy version of Teen Titans Go on the TV, mini TV they provided me, and it was kind of fuzzy going in and out. And I did marvel that they had Cartoon Network there, but yeah, I was definitely a bit of a mess here too, because I was just anxious. I was like, man, should I go out? Like I have some extra time today before I embark on my adventure tomorrow to get to that remote island I wanted to. And I had a mini anxiety attack. I was like, man, you've been traveling for 48 hours and you're scared of going out and you're just nervous and you don't know what's out there. You don't know if you get lost, if there's people who are going to try to trick you, rob you. And I just built this up in my head, and I had this attack, and I was basically debating like, should I just stay in this hotel room for the entire day out of safety? And long story short, I told myself, no, like get out there, at least take a walk out in front of the hotel, slowly see what's out there, and you'll be fine. You've come so far, and it would be such a waste to just kind of hole up in this hotel out of fears. And so I ended up doing it. And I mean, there's all sorts of mini steps you can take to kind of ease yourself out of it. First, talk to the receptionist. The receptionist was super nice when I came in. So I told myself, why not talk to her? Ask her, is it safe out there? And the receptionist, who was very savvy with the area, she's like, yeah, this is a pretty safe area. And you can literally walk and take the bus to the shopping mall nearby. That's mainly the main thing you could do in this city. Um, and so at first I was like, once again, anxious about it. I didn't even know if I wanted to because I was like, me take a bus on my own? What if I get lost? What if I can't? Because, you can't, they don't really speak English that well. They do to an extent, but, I was scared like I get lost on the bus. Like I don't know where to go. I might get off at the wrong bus stop and then I'd be lost in the city. And she basically eased my attention a little bit. She didn't really give me details as much as I hoped, but she was like, "No, it's gonna be fine. It's like the shopping mall is like a 5 minute drive away. The bus will take you there. Everyone uses the bus here." And so the long and short of it is I walked out of that hotel, walked down the dirty pavement, and then the sun was shining bright. I turned the corner, and then all of a sudden it wasn't sketchy anymore. It was this thriving city and these tiny little buses with artwork on it and a bunch of local Filipinos in the bus. And I was still anxious, but not as much anymore. I was seeing movement. I was seeing what was out there, and the roads had, of course, all sorts of like restaurants and stuff um, through them, and it was like it was a different feel, but also kind of similar because the roads were kind of dirt pavement roads, and they were smaller and narrower, but it still was like kind of familiar because it was like you know a road in the States where there's like restaurants and dining centers and stuff lined up on either side. And so the long and short of it, I got on the bus. Um, Talked to the bus driver and some of the people there. They were super helpful. They told me, this is the wrong bus. Wait for the other one. I got on the other one, got to the mall, and my tension slowly started to release. So um, that's kind of what I mean. Like when you do your research beforehand and online that traveling to a place isn't that bad, um, then you don't want to build it up in your head unnecessarily. Because what fun would it have been if I had just stayed holed up in that hotel with the crappy TV going for the whole day? I mean, it would have been worse, and I wouldn't have been able to explore that city, mainly that shopping center, which was really cool. And yeah, I wouldn't have experienced the best haircut I ever got for the cheapest price in the world. I mean, the Filipinos, um, they know how to cut hair, and I've paid for really expensive haircuts. They didn't even come close. I mean, my 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 best haircut I've ever gotten was at that shopping center, and it was probably the cheapest I've ever paid for a haircut too. So that's it. And then just to round out and kind of do a shout out to Asian Pacific Heritage Month. Um, Obviously, I've made a blog post about this. The Asian community in the United States is going through a tough time because there's a small minority of people out there who are spreading hatred towards Asians and attacking elderly Asians. And that's just not a thing anyone should do. To attack senior citizens, grandparents of any culture or race, that's like picking on the weak when you're stronger. It's something that weak people do. Um, but it's a great time to honor Asian Pacific Heritage Month, and we need to speak out and kind of honor this and honor every other culture because you know, not every company, not every community is willing to do that, unfortunately. Um, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily a bad thing. I just think maybe a lot of people seem to be comparing it to Black Lives Matter, and they're saying, well, they got a larger voice, but um, you know, all I'm saying is, I'm trying to spread positivity and kind of, bring a bit more awareness and honor it to my ability. Uh, and so to do that, all I want to do for now, I've already done like a whole blog post and previous podcast kind of talking about those issues, but I wanted to keep it a little lighthearted by honoring the uh, the recent movies, TV films, and progression uh, out there that have Asian male leads. The biggest one would be the recent trailer that dropped with the latest Marvel superhero movie. I assume you all have heard of it because it's been in the news that it was coming for a while. But it is the first Asian superhero in the Marvel cinematic universe, and really excited for it. I saw the trailer and I was so scared it would do badly because I guess it's hard to really pull off like an Asian male lead. It just is. But at least the trailer, the teaser, uh, seemed to have done very well. A lot of likes, good like to dislike ratio. And the film's called Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. So really excited about that. really happy to see how he might join the Avengers in the future, and so really happy about that. There's definitely other stuff coming out and have come out after 8 years of people, slowly pestering me, slightly pestering me about it. I finally got into The Walking Dead. I am on season 3, and I will say it is definitely a progressive TV show because they have Glenn, a Asian male, as a romantic lead, almost from like the start of season 2. And I think that's so progressive because they don't, make him a stereotype or some type of caricature. They make him a legitimate, multidimensional, romantic lead, and part of the core team. So I really like that, and we need to see more of that. It's definitely progressive in a lot of ways, just like how they depict Glenn and so forth. So I think we are coming along, and obviously there's been a lot of voices in the Asian American world talking about um, we need more representation and so forth. So I'm not going to um, beat a horse until it's dead because I mean I don't know what me rambling for another hour on this small podcast I have will do, but I wanted to at least kind of um, honor those things, and it's going to be great. I mean, Shang-Chi is going to be just one of the first steps. Crazy Rich Asians 2 is going to come out soon. And guess what? Michelle Yeoh, uh, she uh, she made an announcement recently that she will be part of the Shang-Chi, the first Asian superhero film. Um, so happy to see her in the movie. Awkwafina is going to be in it, and so we're slowly coming along, and I really hope this video does well. If this film does well, it probably won't do as well as Black Panther because I know that was a big iconic superhero for a while. Uh, but that's that. Thank you for listening and have a great day. Hope you learned something. Oh, yeah, and leave a rating on Apple for this podcast if you found it useful. Every rating counts, especially for me at such a small stage. Thanks for listening. Peace.